The year is 2014, and The Amazing Spider Man 2 just bombed with critics and fans alike, forcing Sony to cancel or delay its plans for a Spider Man based film universe. Sony turned to Disney/Marvel Studios to reboot Spider Man once again in early 2015, exciting fans as it seemed that the horror that was Sony's past 3 Spider Man films were finally over. But many of those people were left feeling even more upset with the decisions Marvel Studios decided to take with the character. Welcome to my newest series, How to Fix, where we look at film, television, video game, and many other types of franchises. I will also be using the series as a way to supplement my main series, Planet Words, where I typically review and talk about film and television franchises. Today, we look at a franchise that I've spoken in depth about previously, which is the MCU Spider Man trilogy. I criticized the MCU's take on Spider Man and chose to speak about it in this first installment of the series because I think it is one of the few things the MCU has actually going for it that can save it from absolute failure in the coming years. But first, I have to address one thing. Part 1. Was I wrong about MCU Spider Man? My MCU Spidey video was the first video I made that became pretty popular, but it was also heavily criticized by viewers who felt that I didn't understand the MCU's take on Spider Man, or thought that I didn't understand Spider-Man in general. So I pose a question to myself. Was I wrong about MCU Spider-Man? Well, in my honest opinion, obviously no I wasn't. But I can also admit that I definitely could have explained things better, and I could have clarified things better. Whether or not you find what I just said repetitive, I still stand by what I just said. First, I want to clarify my feelings towards Homecoming and Far From Home specifically. As I said in my original video, that I did like No Way Home and the path that it seems to have set for the future of Spidey in the MCU, but as for Homecoming and Far From Home, I actually didn't hate them or think they were bad films. Actually, quite the contrary. I actually think that Homecoming and Far From Home are good superhero comic book films, and are overall 2 of the stronger films in the MCU as a whole, but what I didn't like about them is that they were poor Spider-Man films or stories. And that stands even more after Across the Spider-Verse, which I actually talked about in a previous video. If you haven't watched it, I recommend watching that as well. I'd also like to clarify one of my talking points / criticisms that I made about these films that got some major backlash, which is Uncle Ben. So firstly, yes, I know that Uncle Ben was not the character he would eventually become later on during the original Lee Ditko Romita run, which was roughly the first 100 issues of The Amazing Spider-Man, and of course, Amazing Fantasy 15. And as much as I appreciate many of those issues that showed Spidey / Peter in less serious situations for the most part, and didn't really mention Uncle Ben outside of a handful of times, you have to understand that I was born during not only the Raimi films era, the Ultimate run, and in an era that I was exposed to reruns of the 90s animated series, which reinforced the idea of Uncle Ben being Peter's moral compass. And I can even bring up the Spectacular Spider-Man cartoon, which did exactly the same. But even if we look at those first 100 issues, Ben is still shown as one of Peter's inspirations to be Spider-Man, mainly in the 3-issue arc, If This Be My Destiny, which spanned from issue 31 to 33, and of course Spider-Man No More, which is issue 50. And that also happens to be the issue in which Sam Raimi's Spider-Man 2 is based upon for the most part. But during Len Wein's technically final issue 181, The Pain and the Power, it really recaps Peter's career as Spider-Man to this point, as he visits Uncle Ben's grave, recalling how Uncle Ben was the catalyst for Peter becoming Spider-Man and becoming the man he has since Amazing Fantasy number 15. This infamous line from this issue sums up what Uncle Ben is to Peter, and sums up how not mentioning Uncle Ben / disrespecting his legacy was a massive failure in the MCU.
I brought you this, Uncle Ben. For years, I cherished it. It symbolizes everything you ever meant to me, your belief in Peter Parker. It's the only fitting memorial for who you were. My father, teacher, friend. You always built me up where others tore me down. I'm returning your gift to you, Uncle Ben. It's the only way I can express my gratitude. For whatever I am, whatever I've become, the good, whatever good I've done with the powers fate gave me, the best of me came from you. You didn't die in vain, Uncle Ben. You died that Spider-Man might be born. It's not the way I would have chosen it to happen, but if your death is to have meaning, then I must rededicate myself to your faith that one day Peter Parker will do something to change this world for the better.
So I hope that by actively diving deep into the history of Uncle Ben in the comics and explaining my personal experience with the character in Spider-Man media, that people can actually accept that yes, Uncle Ben is important to Peter beyond just being a random boyfriend/husband to May, which basically was the case in the MCU. Now let me get back to talking about Homecoming and Far From Home really quickly. As I said prior, Homecoming and Far From Home are far from terrible films. And they're far from terrible comic book films. The biggest issue with Homecoming for me is that personally the film just didn't feel like a Spider-Man film until the final act, which actually partially adapts the "If This Be My Destiny's" most famous moment with Peter struggling to get the rubble off of him. And as much as I wasn't the biggest fan of the first two acts where Peter was being Iron Boy Jr. basically, I also understand that even this idea that Peter looks up to major heroes like Iron Man actually ties into the early comics where Peter basically looked up to Johnny Storm in the same way that Peter looks up to Iron Man in the MCU. But in the end, Peter basically moves past his fanaticism of Tony/Iron Man and desire to be an Avenger to be on his own as a hero and be the friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. So even though I may think Homecoming wasn't amazing, it had an ending that was ready to be built off of to create a really good overall Spider-Man trilogy, but in the end it was absolutely ruined by, well, the entire MCU at large. Infinity War, instead of focusing on all of the actually established Avengers and other characters in the MCU, they forced Peter/Spider-Man to be included and to become an Avenger, which absolutely ruined the arc that Homecoming tried to start. Then Far From Home came out, and it was a knockoff of Spider-Man 2 in my opinion, and only further ruined Spider-Man by forcing him to go beyond his duties that he committed to in Homecoming by basically forcing him to become the next Iron Man and fight Avenger-level threats in Europe. This may be a retread of my original review on these films, but my thoughts haven't changed whatsoever. Far From Home is a poor example of what a Spider-Man film should be, and in my opinion is the poorest example. They had a really powerful moment where Peter basically chooses that he is going to defy the claims that he's going to be the next Iron Man, then right after literally has a moment that is reminiscent of Iron Man while he builds his new suit on the plane to Back in Black by AC/DC, which ruined any steam that the film may have had left to fix its disastrous first and second half, similarly to the way in which Homecoming did it. The final thing I want to address about my original MCU Spider-Man video is the idea that as an overall trilogy/story, it's a perfect Spider-Man origin story that barely mirrors the first 101-ish issues that Spider-Man appears in. But here's the problem with that. No Way Home was originally going to be a Craven film, not the multiversal event that basically led MCU's Peter to grow up and have his official origin story. So sure, now when we watch all three films back to back to back to back, I think I said an extra back, but as an overall story, it makes a lot of sense as an origin story for Peter growing up from being Spider-Boy to Spider-Man, but it doesn't fix the fact that Far From Home and Homecoming were just not on the level that they should have been to tell a great Spider-Man story. Homecoming wasn't the best adaptation of If This Be My Destiny like it could have been. Far From Home just overall wasn't a good film because of the massive plot holes and contradictory plot points that were in it, and sure, No Way Home did save it and set our faithful hero down a path of hopefully proper treatment, but with how the MCU operates, there is still a chance for Spider-Man to fall right back into the same bullshit that ruined his first trilogy and his Civil War, Infinity War, and Endgame appearances. And that's why I believe I know the answer on how to fix MCU Spider-Man. Part 2. How to fix MCU Spider-Man. Letter A. Spider-Man 4 before Secret Wars. I know it's a super long section title, but basically all you need to take from it is that my first point is that Spider-Man 4 needs to come out before Secret Wars. To properly follow up No Way Home, Spider-Man 4 not only needs to come out before Secret Wars, but needs to be a very personal, grounded, street-level crime-fighting story. Now, there's been no indication that Spider-Man 4 is coming out before Kang Dynasty or Secret Wars, which is basically just the two-part Secret Wars story similar to Infinity War and Endgame, but with the news that both films got slightly pushed back, there is still a chance that the next Spider-Man film can release before those films. Obviously, with the strikes, who actually knows right now, but anyway, the biggest reason why this needs to happen is simply because by picking up where No Way Home left off with the major Avenger-level multiversal galactic story that Secret Wars is, will ultimately ruin the ending of No Way Home in the exact same way that Homecoming was ruined by Infinity War. And from the rumors and news that both Zendaya and Jacob Batalon are supposedly going to return in the next Spider-Man trilogy, this really could lead to a massive disaster and the final nail in the coffin of live-action Spidey in my opinion. But if they allow Peter to actually experience an extremely grounded story post No Way Home, before sending him off to Battleworld or wherever they end up doing, it will absolutely add layers to Peter in ways we haven't seen since the TASM films. I'll give a few ideas that I think should be implemented into Spider-Man 4, or what I'm going to give the working title of A Broken Home. And yes, I know some people hate the home titles, but fuck it. I think they just work with the overall MCU Spider-Man thing. Anyways, the first idea I have is there absolutely needs to be no Ned or MJ in this film. Simply put, the first film post No Way Home needs to see Peter struggling to balance his life as Spider-Man and Peter without his friends or family. Or in other words, have Peter become a recluse because he knows the dangers that being Spider-Man brings to not only him, but also his friends and other people who are close with him. Him attempting to try and get Ned/MJ to remember him would literally destroy his decision at the end of No Way Home to let them live their lives without him, and would ruin everything that No Way Home is supposed to represent for this version of Peter, a complete reset/do-over. I'd only have them be in the film for a short time, preferably in like passing reference, or maybe like a shot of him like spying on them as they're heading off to college, who knows. Something like that would make sense only. But let's move on to my second suggestion. Felicia Hardy/Black Cat should be a major character. Felicia can be a possible new love interest in the film, or maybe somebody just trying to get close to Peter who now keeps to himself for the most part. Even with Peter brushing her off, she would be determined to break his shell. And she would do the same as Black Cat, being a nuisance to Spider-Man whilst also trying to break his shell to form a partnership with him against whoever the big bad is going to be. Which brings me to my third suggestion. The villain needs to be a part of the street-level criminal underworld. Now, I don't have a specific foe for Spidey here, but I have a few that I think could play the role really well. Wilson Fisk/Kingpin is definitely one of those, but as of right now, he is more than likely going to be playing a major role in the Daredevil Born Again show, so he may not be the best choice as the main big bad for this film. Other foes I can see are Tombstone, Hammerhead, Silvermane, the Smythe family, or even a more obscure, to most people anyway, foe, the Big Man, who pretty much inspired Hammerhead's creation later on, but anyway. Another major villain that was actually set up in the post-credits scene of Homecoming could finally get to be a great villain for the next installment, and that's the Scorpion/Mac Gargan. I'd love to finally see this plot setup get resolved, with Mac becoming the Scorpion through a J. Jonah Jameson experiment to create a foe as strong as Spider-Man, which is similar to the comic origin. My next suggestion is to have Peter actually working for JJ, possibly as a freelance videographer, so that it puts a modern twist on Peter's job as a freelance photographer, while also tying in with how the Daily Bugle is represented in the MCU. My last suggestion for Spider-Man 4 is no symbiote. So yes, I know in the post-credits scene of No Way Home, the symbiote was pretty much set up, but I think this storyline should be held off until either Secret Wars or Spider-Man 5. And I think this is the main reason why I'd like Spider-Man 4 before Secret Wars, because I think if Marvel decides to bring the symbiote to the MCU, it definitely is going to tie in with Secret Wars, as it was originally brought into the comics through the original Secret Wars event. And I know that many people think that it makes sense for Peter to go through the symbiote storyline right after the ending of No Way Home, as it would tie into the already dark/series path that No Way Home seemed to have set with said ending. But I think that throwing Peter into like the darkest storyline he faces in the books and all other media directly after he actually has become Spider-Man would be way too much darkness for Peter to overcome. Just imagine if Peter had gotten the symbiote right after Uncle Ben died in the comics. He would never be able to recover to actually become a true friendly neighborhood Spider-Man, and he would have fallen into the darkness with No Way Out. And it actually reminds me similarly to the Spider-Carnage storyline from the 90s animated series, which is the original Spider-Verse storyline, actually, the first ever one. So I don't really want to see that right now. The thing about Spider-Man that is so great is how his stories represent the ups and downs of life. And so, yes, I know he goes through dark periods, but he also goes through good periods. And while Spider-Man 4 should be a serious film, it shouldn't just drive Peter into absolute darkness. It should be a story where Peter overcomes the darkness that he's already had to face post No Way Home. So if Marvel Studios and Sony actually decide to release Spider-Man 4 before Secret Wars, then they really have the chance to create a very deep, complex overall trilogy that ties in well with the Avengers films, but also kind of gives a really complex overall trilogy that can, for the most part, tie in with the next 100 issues in the comics as well, where Peter kind of goes through those up and downs of darkness and non-darkness, because post 100 is kind of, but not really college, but, whatever. Let's go ahead and dive into my ideas for Secret Wars now. Letter B. Secret Wars should mirror the 2015 event for the most part. Now, to be honest, I'm not the most familiar with the 2015 Secret Wars event, but I do know that it combines all of the multiversal worlds, or mostly the 616 and 1610 in the battle world, which basically destroys the multiverse, or certain parts of it anyway, from what I know anyway. Now, I don't think it has to perfectly mirror the 2015 event, but it should definitely combine a few universes together, which will ultimately make up the MCU's main universe. Now, you're probably wondering what this has to do with Spider Man. Well, Spider Man is one of the main characters of both Secret Wars events, and many things happen to him as a result of Secret Wars. I think Battle Worlds should exist in two separate ways. The first Battle World should be where the actual Secret Wars takes place, and the second Battle World should be what Battle World basically is in the 2015 event, a new Earth/world built from the combining of different universes, Earths. A lot of words in there, but anyway, this is obviously how the 20th Century Fox film franchises will become a part of the MCU. The Earth where Deadpool, X-Men, the X-Men/Mutants, Blade, and the Fantastic Four will more than likely merge into the MCU's Earth in this way. And basically, I think that all the heroes from each universes will team up to fight against the forces of evil on the war battle world. And then in the end, the MCU's Earth and the Fox universe's Earth will kind of combine into one to create the new MCU battle world/Earth instead. We'll just say it'll create the new MCU. And from a lot of the rumors that I've read, the MCU is actually going to basically get soft rebooted after this phase is over anyway. Obviously, I don't know if that's true or not, but this is obviously the chance for them to do it. And yeah, some of you are probably asking, but how will this affect Peter? Well, he will obviously game the symbiote here by accidentally bringing it with him when he's transported to Battleworld, and he will more than likely see Tobey Spider there, because Tobey and Andrew are supposedly going to be coming back for the Secret Wars films, which I guess it makes sense. And Tobey Spidey's pretty much just gonna warn him of the dangers of the symbiote, with Peter deciding not to listen to him. Peter will use the symbiote suit throughout the entirety of the Secret Wars films that he's in, but the real twist is awaiting Peter for him back home. Letter C, A New Home. So if this working title I've chosen for Spider-Man 5 wasn't spoilery enough, let's just get right into this. Peter is transported back to New York City and returns to his apartment, oblivious to the changes the Secret Wars have caused to the world, his world. Peter eventually goes out on patrol, reconnecting with Felicia after being gone for so long. As the two swing/jump together through the city in the night, Peter swings past the billboard in Times Square, leaving him in shock. It's an advertisement for a new Broadway show starring Mary Jane Watson. So yeah, this is part of the consequences or changes to the new MCU universe post-Secret Wars. Basically, I'd like to see Zendaya actually play the real Mary Jane Watson. Her hair dyed red, an actress or model, and the party girl, kind of. Now, the billboard idea isn't the only way I can see it going down. In fact, I have another idea that can work as well. This time involving Feast and Anna Watson. I can see Peter going over to Feast, meeting Anna Watson as he's trying to make sure Feast is living up to May's legacy. She sets him up with her niece, Mary Jane. He would go out on patrol with Felicia, just act completely out of character because obviously he has the symbiote and he's trying to be distant. He's pissed off for whatever reason, right? So then he just brushes Felicia off and heads to get ready for his meeting with Mary Jane or date, whatever it's gonna be. He gets ready. Somebody knocks on the door. He goes to answer it, which reveals Zendaya as Mary Jane saying the famous line, "Face it, Tiger, you just hit the jackpot," causing Peter to have more on his mental plate. I also think that Peter should go and find Reed in the Baxter Building, which is the old abandoned tower, to kind of figure out what is going on. Now, my ideas there don't have to be exactly as it goes, but I still think that Ned and MJ need to be reset to be slightly more comic accurate characters moving forward if they're actually going to be involved in the next trilogy. I also think that since post-Secret Wars, the MCU's universe is going to officially combine with the other characters from Fox, this is going to have to be a major plot point and at least the first Spidey film after those films come out. Overall, I think that this should be a film that has Peter struggling to fit into this new home, struggling to accept that the home he once knew is basically no more, struggling with the symbiote, struggling to juggle his relationships/feelings for Felicia and MJ, and most importantly, struggle with his emotions and the way that all of these other issues add to that inner struggle. I think that this film should have Peter's darkest storyline. One where he is forced to truly choose responsibility over power, but also one where he is forced to accept the changes around him. I think that Peter should struggle with his newfound strength thanks to the symbiote, and how it causes him to do things that are the opposite of what he was taught by May, Ben, and even Tobey and Andrew's Spider-Man. Now wait, Uncle Ben? Well, yeah, I truly believe that we may finally actually get a reference to Ben during the college trilogy. If Marvel/Sony wants to continue the idea that each trilogy is based off of the arcs from the comics and wants us to actually believe that it was the plan all along, then Ben needs to show up here in the college trilogy, and I think that this is the right film to do it. And basically, I'd use Uncle Ben similarly to the way he was used in Spectacular during that symbiote arc, and similarly in the way that he was used to help Spider-Carnage in the 90s series, to rise above the struggles, pain, and Carnage symbiote to take responsibility for his power. I think that Peter has to have something traumatic happen to him, or that he needs to stop pulling his punches, doing the opposite of what Andrew and Tobey basically tried to save him from in both No Way Home and the Secret Wars films. This would lead Peter to have an inner struggle with the symbiote that then leads to Peter having his moment with Uncle Ben, which would then allow for him to strip himself of the grasp the symbiote has on him. But this is where I hit a crossroads. I feel like the symbiote arc needs to last at least 2 films. But at the same time, with the way I see things playing out, if they play out similarly to the way I've pretty much set things up here, then I don't know if this arc can truly last 2 films. So if you or somebody else can find a way to make that arc last for 2 films, good for them. I just don't see it happening with the way I've set things up here. So if things play out in the way I'm presenting them, I think the most logical step or way to have that traumatic event happen to Peter that he sheds himself of the symbiote is by having him face off against my favorite Spider-Man villain, Hobgoblin. Not only will the Hobgoblin bring upon the trauma from Norman in No Way Home, but he will turn out to be Ned Leeds. Now before anyone says it, I know Ned technically was never the Hobgoblin in the comics, but this is the perfect time to have him actually be not only the Hobgoblin, but be the villain in a film. I also think that he should know that Peter is Spider-Man due to his connections to the mystic arts shown in No Way Home, which he uses for evil instead of good. Now I think that what should happen is that Peter's trauma and anger, which is just being egged on even more by the symbiote, will cause Peter to just absolutely fuck up the Hobgoblin, only for Peter to find out that the man behind the mask is Ned. This will give Peter the perfect opportunity to look within himself, have his Uncle Ben moment, and rid himself of the symbiote. But I also think that by not only realizing his foolishness with the symbiote, but also realizing his foolishness with MJ and Felicia would lead him to have his Spider-Man No More moment as well. This being the big twist in the film. The outside voices from JJJ, his failures with both Felicia and MJ, his failure to live up to the morals that Ben, May, and Tobey and Andrew instilled in him will cause him to give up the mantle in an attempt to fix his life in his own eyes. Peter will not only dump the symbiote suit, but will also dump his red and blue suit, mirroring the famous Spider-Man No More panel and shot from Spider-Man 2. Is that just the way this film ends? Well, of course not. Peter will attempt to fix his relationship with MJ, Felicia, and whoever else he basically shitted on throughout the movie, only to find out that A, they didn't even notice, B, they didn't even have time for him anyway, or C, they understood he was going through something and needed to be left alone. But JJJ, he would basically begin to lose work because of there being no Spider-Man to rant about for him, as he proudly hangs the red and blue suit on the walls of his office. Eventually, Peter would hear someone cry for help, and even though he is maskless, web shooterless, he rescues a man who oddly reminds him of Uncle Ben. Peter would look inside once more, thinking back to Ben's murder being the catalyst for him to be a hero, thinking back to May's death as another catalyst to be responsible for the great power he was given, and pledge that no innocent person will come to harm because of Spider-Man's failure to act, leading Peter to steal his suit back from the Bugle and having a triumphant final swing. Oh, but what about the symbiote? Well, the post-credits will give you a little hint at its fate, falling into the hands of the CEO of sex himself, Ned Leeds. Letter D, A Venomous Home. Finally, we are on to the final of the trilogy that will have officially fixed MCU Spider Man in my opinion. The final film in this trilogy should obviously be a major showdown between Venom and Spider Man, but I'm gonna put this out here now. If it were completely up to me, I personally wouldn't even have had the symbiote appear in this trilogy. But because of the post-credit scene in No Way Home, showing the symbiote being left over, as well as the Secret War films coming out, it's pretty obvious that it's something that we have to work with. Now, I don't really have much of a structure thought out for this film, but I think it should see Peter actually re-engaging with MJ in some way, and I think Peter and Felicia should agree that they work better as partners than as lovers. Peter reconnects with MJ and begins to date her in this film, and I think we should see Peter beginning to truly balance his life as Peter and his life as Spidey, only for things to become out of whack because of a seemingly black-suited villain causing terror around the city. Peter goes out into the city to find this creature, only to find out it is the Venom symbiote, now bonded with the CEO of Sex. Is that even a meme still? Anyway, Ned/Venom would address Spidey as Peter and reveal that he has known all along about the spell, about the universes crashing together, and worst of all, Peter's secret identity. And now with Venom, he is unstoppable. The two would have their first battle, leading Peter to be beaten, which would then obviously lead Venom to be a nuisance throughout the entire film, only for Peter to finally beat him in the end with the help of Flash Thompson, who would be critically injured in the battle, and Black Cat. So, Tony Revolori. I'm cool with him coming back as Flash, and I'd actually really like to see him be a hardened soldier similar to his real story and the Agent Venom story, which of course will be due to the universes crashing together. The symbiote would become unbonded with Ned in the process, and would bond with Flash, who would attempt to attack Ned, the symbiote believing him to be weak, and Flash angered that he severely injured him. Peter, however, would get into Flash's head, who would have the ability to fight the symbiote off, and have the mental fortitude to actually control it to his will, instead of being controlled by it. The two would turn Ned into the authorities, and Peter would swing off, with Agent Venom/Flash not far behind, becoming a vigilante like his own hero, Spider Man. Now, this is a bit of what I'd ideate for this third film. I know most people might say that the anti-hero Venom is showing up way too much in the current film/TV media with the Venom films already, but I don't really see how they could actually do Venom as a one-off villain in the MCU. I think an Agent Venom version in the MCU is probably the best course for them to go. And as much as I am a fan of the Venom storylines from the comics, I honestly prefer that the characters stay in the Sonyverse/Venomverse and stay there. But again, since it seems that Peter's ultimately going to be facing off against Venom, I think that this is probably the best way to do it. Peter in this film should begin to experience the beauties of the duality of being an average Joe and superhero, while struggling to continue being able to balance both of them, as there is a danger of his identity being revealed to the public once again. I think the film should build onto the growing relationship between Peter and MJ, and I still do think Felicia should still be in the film. But like I said, I don't really have a total story idea for this one where I would be able to talk about her involvement in a major way besides the final fight. Overall, I find that this film is the most difficult for me to kind of see a solution for. I feel that there are just issues with what we have to tell with the story just because of the way No Way Home ended, and the fact that Secret Wars is happening. And I have to put this out there that I try to be as realistic, or I try to tie in as much as possible to what's going on. I've seen some people do pre-writes for like this trilogy, and they kind of just disregarded that kind of stuff. And I think that that's not the right way to go about it. If I wanted to fix the MCU Spider Man the way that I really wanted to, I could have just did that video. But at the end of the day, I think when we do stuff like this, we have to actually tie in what's going on around it. And that's kind of the biggest issue, because we have Secret Wars coming out, and we obviously have a bunch of people that are going to be coming into the MCU. We've seen soft reboot rumors going on, and that has to be tied in to the stories that I'm going to be able to tell, or at least kind of suggest should happen. But, you know, at the end of the day, this is the best way to fix the MCU's take on Spider-Man for me, because I decided that I want to bring in all of the other aspects of the MCU to tie it in. Part 3, Conclusion. To conclude, MCU Spider-Man seems to be on the right path as of right now. But if they diverge from what I've set here, for the most part anyway, I think there may be some problems that will only continue to ruin the character of Peter Parker/Spider-Man in the MCU. And sure, I don't think they're actually going to go with the exact ideas I've set here with my suggestions, but at the very least, I hope that they can go a somewhat similar route to what I've suggested here. I want to see a truly great trilogy for the Spider-Man, and I think this can really be that if they do things the right way. I feel that I've fixed this take on Spidey fully, but now it's time for Marvel and Sony to prove that they can actually do the right thing with this character, and that is all I can hope for the future of the character in live action. I just want to thank you all for watching this first episode of this new series. I don't know when the second episode is going to come out of How to Fix. This is going to be, like I said, a supplemental series for my main channel, like my main videos, which is the Planet Words series that you see, which is mainly my normal video essays. I wouldn't really call them video essays, but my video reviews of like film and television. Maybe we'll go into video games. I do want to bring video games into this How to Fix series. But the next episode, I don't know yet. And obviously, with the strikes going on, I have kind of a plan of what I wanted to do, but the strikes kind of ruined that a little bit, which kind of sucks. But we'll see what happens, I guess. I don't really know how to like say anything when it comes to that. But yeah, I hope you guys subscribe to this channel. Obviously, this is my solo channel, the A Nuisance Media channel. I think I've talked about this a few times. We're kind of branching off like to do our main videos on our solo channels instead. I think that the group channel, though, we're gonna like start to actually still do stuff on there. In what way, I don't know yet, but you should subscribe to both, obviously. But otherwise, thanks for watching. I'll see you guys next time in either a Planet Words video, a gaming video, or another How to Fix. Peace out, everyone.